to this gathering, the topic and everything. I might have taught in a high school for a term back in the 80s or the 90s, and that's about it. So at best, I am an in-law to education. I'm willing to and to ask questions which might have been on my mind for years. I've been a parent of a student in high school and the primary school system here. So there may be some questions that I might recall from back then, and anything else that would be worth delving into. I'm prepared to engage where I can. So thanks for the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Rev. Mr. Vanderpool, your opening remarks.
Yes, thank you very much, Eric, and a pleasant good night again to fellow members of the panel. I too am looking forward to discussing this very critical area of education and student well-being for our children here in Angola, and indeed for the region. We have been tasked with a very important and necessary charge, the one of taking care of the least of these among us. And what better way, especially in a climate that we find ourselves in today, to be able among ourselves, and with, of course, the involvement and participation of all those who choose to write in and to comment in any way. And the good thing about this is that the conversation can and will continue. So I'm looking forward to all that will happen here. And I'm sure that we will, something said, some issue raised will go a long way in getting to where we want to get eventually. So thanks again, and looking forward.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. Ms. Kentish Rogers, your opening remarks, please.
Good night, everyone. And thank you to all the members of the panel who have taken time out of their very busy schedules to speak about what I consider one of the most important ministries, no bias here, one of the most important ministries in Caribbean societies, which is the ministry responsible for education. I really believe that we each, all of us, parents, students, stakeholders, community members, governments, we have a vested interest in seeing education succeed. And if that is our heralding cry, then we each have a responsibility to lift our weight along the way. So I'm looking forward for this conversation.
Thank you, Minister. Okay.
Minister.
I know. Forgive me. Force of habit. Okay, let's get a ball rolling. And I'll start again with you, Mrs. Byron. And you maybe can give us an idea of, well, once I ask the question, the Antigua-Barbuda perspective, and the rest of our panel can jump in afterwards and give an idea how it is in Anguilla, and we can see how it compares, see what's the same or what the differences are. So I'll start off by asking the question, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing education and the education sector in Antigua? And I know I saw that you're very much involved in CXC and CSEC, so you might even be able to give us a little brief glimpse into how it is also in the wider Caribbean region.
Right, good night again. So one of my concerns, or one of the concerns that seems to have arisen, is that the statistics for the past maybe 3, 4, 5 years will be showing that many of our students leaving the fifth form, having just done CXCs and so on, the results are showing that 50% of our students are not meeting the requirements of 5 CSEC subjects, the minimum, expectations. And so there's cause for concern. And then when you add those who leave school with mathematics and English, it goes down to 20%. And so it suggests that something is not right in those areas. And it also suggests to me that there is a cadre of students who are not able to negotiate successfully and maybe need an alternative approach. And so those would be my opening remarks at this stage, because this, for me, has impact on what happens to them after they leave secondary school. Are they ready for the workforce? Are they able to go on to tertiary education if they have not met, if you have half of your student population not meeting requirements for continuing to higher education and so on? And so we have to look at that, because we sometimes herald these persons who get, the 10, 11, 12, 22 subjects, and we make a big deal about it. We actually have a national awards to recognize those high flyers. But the question is, what happens with that other 50% of students who don't make that cut? And what is this reflecting of our education system? So that would be where I start. I would have some other ideas later in terms of how are we treating with education in this 21st century, and the type of Gen Zs, what type of education programs they need. So yeah, I will start there, and as my concern, and I'll come back in a little later.
Mr. Vanderpool, Teacher Len, can you just jump in and give your perspective as a teacher of many years in the educational system here in Anguilla?
Yes, certainly. Well, when I listen to my colleague, sometimes the issues are so similar, because the statistics, as we have often heard them here when we are discussing and listening to the reporting, it is that Anguilla is on par with the rest of the Caribbean. Now, that could mean anything, being on par, but my main concern, and the concerns of a number of colleagues and other stakeholders in education really, is whether our school and the system is doing enough given our own natural advantage, especially Anguilla's relatively small school population, for the delivery of a fit-for-purpose education in Anguilla. And by fit-for-purpose, I mean where all children become, at the very least, confident readers and communicators, able to think critically and debate persuasively, that they become well-adjusted and empathetic, helping and supporting each other in healthy relationships. We feel that over the years, those issues have been eroded, especially the softer side of education. In the home, you see different mores and changes and breakdowns at the home level. And so we recognize, and I often quote Maria Montessori, who says, well, let us say that the home is failing the children. What does that say for the school? So in a nutshell, we are thinking that education and the role of the school and the role of the education system has to change, as situations on the ground change. And there's no doubt that we are living now in very, very different times, to even say 10, 15, 20 years ago. And not to talk about even before that. So that is the main concern. What does school look like as an effective kind of we welcome in 2026 and going forward?
So along the same vein, Rev, I'll throw it to you because from your bio, you worked as a correctional services counselor in the prison for many years. How do you see persons who are coming into the prison system, on average, like their educational level, and how do you guys deal with it in terms of getting them up to par, just to make them better citizens when they do leave?
I'm not officially authorized to speak on behalf of the prison, but I would, and I get your question, and it's an important question from within my context. And it is something that we wrestle with and try to address. And a number of initiatives are being taken to address those issues within the context of the prison. It is a challenge because it is a reflection of the wider community. And when you speak about main concerns, there are so many main concerns that I could think of, ranging from the exciting new world of artificial intelligence and what that means for preparing to get a job in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or keeping a job. And how does the school system prepare students today for that new environment? To something as fundamental and basic as the pastoral care division in the school system. How do you, and by pastoral care, I don't mean sermons and the rest of that, but within the context of education, you're looking at student discipline, truancy, you're looking at how well, and Lennox touched on it a bit, the home environment. Are the students able to function at their best? Are they coming to school hungry? Are they worried? Are they anxious? Are they traumatized about different experiences at home? Are they being bullied in the school? Are they suffering from neglect? Are there issues like that? With all the fights and everything happening in the school, what about the anger issues? So, and whatever support is happening at home or not happening at home. All these elements within the pastoral context in the school. You have a deputy principal who's responsible for pastoral issues, the well-being of the students, well-being of the teachers, and how do the parents factor into that, and they're dealing with those issues. What impact does that have on the whole end product of the school? We move away from Valley Secondary School to the comprehensive system. Valley Secondary, we had common entrance exam in my days. That's how I got into the high school. I had to pass to get in. Now with this universal entry system with a comprehensive system, we widen the scope. So it's not just academics. It's not just academics now, it's how well-rounded can we create and produce a student with various other elements of the education system in terms of skills and other resources that they can draw on to help them to be a rounded individual, to fit into society, an evolving society which requires different skills. so that somebody who may be good in maths might, okay, they may do well, they may go in the bank, or they may do something like that. But, or in architectural drawing, a good example is I use artificial intelligence to give me a map, a technical drawing of a building. It wasn't perfect, but I had an idea of what it was trying to do. How does that, my knowledge of that, am I getting versed in that technology, prepare me for the future as compared to someone who is trained in it and has gone abroad, or they have studied architectural drawing and they have a degree in it, and now they are regarded as an architect. But then I can go to artificial intelligence and get my drawings and everything that I need, and I don't have to call upon the architect to do what I need. And there's a lot of talk in the news these days about how artificial intelligence will replace certain jobs and skills and so on. So the question is, how is the school system preparing our students to fit in 2026 Anguilla and 2028 Anguilla going forward? And how is that preparation being affected by all the issues in the home and in the community, that students have to wrestle with, and competing with their attention to focus on their classes? They're not sleeping well, they're not eating well, they are not physically well, because all these things are happening. The trauma that may be happening in the home, domestic abuse, child abuse and neglect, all these things come together and impact the student. And so the outcome, fifth form, sixth form, that end product is a reflection of how we manage these issues within the school system, from primary school through to high school. So those are some of the challenges that for me remain, and how well are we addressing them, preparing for them, equipping ourselves to deal with them. Those are some of the challenges for me, that stand out when I think of education today.
Thank you, Rev. So Deanne, so I'll ask you that question, and how, as a minister, and you can come forward to how you see it as a whole in Anguilla, because we heard the teacher's perspective from Antigua, Anguilla, and the Rev with his overall perspective, dealing with some of our most vulnerable. But how your perspective now as a minister, and even as a young person still here in Anguilla, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing education?
Well, I think the largest challenge, and I think the challenge touches on nearly everything that has been spoken about this evening, but it boils down to me, to this essential problem, which is learning. How is learning perceived within our society? And whenever we're looking at things like AI, or um, even literacy, or critical reasoning and critical thinking skills, predominantly it's about how do we engage our students to have a desire and a love for the process of learning. Learning is not something that is discrete. It's not, you learn this and then you're finished. And oftentimes our system, I think the system that we currently have, can sometimes shoebox students into believing that when they pick up a book, they read it, they distill all of that information onto a paper, that is it. They have no need for it anymore. And you'll see little elements of that being reinforced with teaching students for a test. We'll teach to the test. We'll teach them to pass the test. But what we're not doing is teaching children how to develop the skill of continuous learning. So if we were developing the skill of continuous learning, the challenges that the modern society is placing before us, where people are saying the data is suggesting that AI will be able to do 80% of the jobs that we are currently doing. The question usually then becomes, well, what will happen to us? What happens to people in the balance? And I like to think of it two ways. One is that there's a responsibility on governments to take action to ensure that AI doesn't have a materially negative impact upon us. But the second responsibility is this, which is whatever we are, whenever we're facing something new, our abilities, our soft skills, the skills that we're supposed to be building up while we're going through the education system, which is our resilience, our ability to solve complex challenges, our ability to reason critically, even like Reverend was saying about conflict resolution, all of those skills will come to the fore. But sometimes we're not thinking about those skills coming to the fore. Those skills aren't coming to the fore because we're learning that we are conceptualizing challenges as discrete. There's no application across, which comes with critical thinking. It's the cross application of our skills into different areas. As a young person, I do have a fear in relation to the use of AI. Not because I don't think students who are willing to use it to help them brainstorm can't have and develop better critical reasoning skills, but predominantly, that's not how most people are using AI. Most people are using AI as a shortcut, as a way as to not to do the labor of thinking. And that I have a fundamental problem with because the labor of thinking is is an important part of how we maintain connections as society. We don't outsource our thinking. Thinking is part of what makes us human. And so I do have a fundamental challenge with AI and its use in education systems. And I do think it's a challenge. I've seen it in my younger friends, cousins, young people who I know who use it. I can see the laziness, and I mean that in terms of the way they apply their thinking and reasoning, peeking through the use of AI. And I've seen other societies and countries who are like, oh, we have to actually do something about this. We have to teach our students how to use these tools or how to or to peel back on the use and the acceptance of these tools within our education system to protect our students and to protect the thing that makes us human. So I mean, those are some of the challenges that are in front of us. But I don't want to take over the whole of the session with the challenges.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Dee. Now, as it relates to challenges, because I mean, you guys identify a whole long area, a lot of challenges, from the life skills, the use of AI. Less than 50% of our students are achieving 5 C6 passes, and the number goes down to 20 when you take out maths and English. So, and anyone can jump in with this question, because like I said, I want a free-flowing conversation. How do we address some of these challenges that we've identified? Because the challenges are wide and varied. From the home to the school to that AI. How do we address these challenges? What steps do we start to take to get education on a better footing? Anyone can jump in.
Maybe I'd step in. Oh, Marian, go ahead.
Okay. I usually don't like to open back on questions, but it's okay. I was thinking that, you see, education is a system thing. And I feel that a lot of the issues that we have raised need to be looked at from the perspective of all the stakeholders. in education. And so there has to be a recognition that because it's systemic, from the minister of education to the cleaner to the parents, everybody has a role to play in all of these issues. And I think one of the things that what happens is that oftentimes we're not on the same hymn page, singing from the same hymn page of what the vision is. Obviously, the vision has been changing in terms of the impact on the technological world, what's happening in industry, what's happening socio-psychologically with our young people. And so I feel that it's important that we're able to identify what are those soft skills and values that regardless of what changes are happening, there's still some fundamental things that we need our young people to um, learn in school, to acquire critical thinking. We spoke about that, problem solving. We need them to be able to be adaptable because change is a thing for them. Then they need to be able to embrace the digital literacies that come on board because that is their world. And at the end of the day, we still need them to learn to be respectful, to collaborate with others. And so as we shape this person, it's important that all stakeholders are able to understand what it is we're doing so that there can be partnership in trying to produce this ideal young person, especially as we get ready to they get ready to go into the world of work. And so there's a saying that the school is a microcosm of the society. And it's important that we establish from the very leadership of education what it is, how we want our persons, our young people to function. We have to model it. I noticed that there's a tendency to point fingers. We point fingers at the parents and we blame the parents for not doing what they're supposed to do. But at the same time, we need to also establish what it is that the school leaders are supposed to be doing, what it is that the ministry and the technical persons are supposed to be doing. So I think the approach, somebody mentioned it, that the approach should not be piecemeal, but it really requires sitting down and integrating what that vision is. What are the strategic goals that we're trying to achieve? And what are the programs that need to be adapted so that our young people can feel that their education is relevant to them? So I just wanted to go on that because I tend to see things from a holistic approach and rather than a piecemeal approach, almost finger pointing. So I'll just pause there, and I'm sure somebody else may want to pick up on maybe something.
Dee, you are about to make a contribution just before Mrs. Bryan.
Yeah, I was saying I agree with her in that I think it's a whole system approach. And what I was actually going to say is I think that we are now at the point where we require radical accountability. We require because it will require a radical change to the way we approach this thing. We cannot keep identifying the system as stagnant, as needing change, and continue to do small tweaks or to make slight amendments here or a little bite here. It really requires us to take the whole. We're all lifting together. You know, if you have a heavy rock and you get a ton of people to lift, heave at one time, that's kind of where we are in education. Because I would say the finger pointing has exacerbated the problems that we face And I say that because when I point the finger at you and then you point the finger at me, and then we're there, we're in a standoff, there is no one there who's in between saying, hey, look, hey, I put my hands up. Here is where I may have disappointed the system, and here is where I recommit to doing better. Nobody is saying that. There is a lack of acknowledgement in that we can't move to the next round if we're gonna stay doing the blame game. Um, but I will say that there in that whole system of radical change, of radical accountability, is saying, okay, well, we can't do this anymore because we're seeing the evidence. If we say 50% of our students are not getting five CXC subjects and even less when you take out English and maths, if we say that our literacy scores are scaring us, that says more than just the numbers on the paper. That says about the state of our democracies. Because eventually these will be people who will make decisions about the direction of their countries. But you're saying on paper, I may not be able to really functionally understand a string of paragraphs together. I may not understand the ramification. And we look elsewhere in the world and we're actually seeing the ramification of lack of investment and lack of radical acceptance of what's happening in the education systems elsewhere. So it is therefore, and I don't want to point my finger anywhere because again, we're moving away from blaming, but we're saying now is the time. And as burnt out as many of us are, as tired as many of us are, it is still our responsibility to show up. And there are people who day in and day out, they show up to do the work, they give of themselves. We also have to be able to support them and to give them the ability to continue. Because I have seen in our systems where people who do give a lot, because they give and everybody keeps taking.
Areas and solid points that even if back to when Rev was talking about the AI and Dee spoke about it and how you see your cousins really and other young people looking to take a shortcut. If we were to cast ourselves back to 1986 and the inception of the comprehensive system, so-called, here in Anguilla, you found a similar mindset at that time where because the common entrance exam was done away with, it was interpreted as if there's no need to study. There was automatic promotion. That came in at the same time with the high-end tourism boom, and parents were able to get however many jobs they wanted. And so big money met an easier time, or so it was interpreted, in school. And so everything just was on a slide. I think that without, again, naming and blaming, I think one missed opportunity of the time was to properly, and of successive years, was to properly educate and set up what comprehensive education meant and what the opportunities of a universal secondary education provided for, and so in many ways, one can see the impacts and the results of 1986 all the way through to today. It presents in different forms. Now it's AI. It was the same attitude with AI. Even on the regional, and Marian could speak more to this, but I could remember Dr. Didicus Jules when he was registered because in a very real way, CXC depends on the integrity of the education systems for relevance, you know. And so therefore, you know, lots of professors and reports and so on come out to say, look here, these systems are really not pulling their weight. You know, I made a comment a few weeks ago on a similar program talking about the number of pilot projects that we do here, you know, and I was really trying to suggest that given our natural advantage of a small size, one high school that we have, we shouldn't be having a conversation about poor school leaving CXC results. We should definitely not be having a negative conversation about literacy in our schools. You know, if we're talking about financial independence, financial literacy, um, health, care, AI, the internet, whatever we talk about, we have to put literacy to it, education to it, financial education, this education, that education, sustainability, this. It automatically says to us that we cannot be shortchanging our students when it comes to literacy. And somebody made a point earlier about the blame to go around with parents. And I have been known sometime in my past life to be picking up for parents, you know. But it is not a matter of picking up for parents, but I'm saying for the millions and millions of dollars in budgetary allocations for governments, not only in Anguilla, but across the Caribbean, you know, and all these offices filled with education officers for this and that and the third. Um, we cannot then come to the final analysis and say, well, you know what? Throw our hands up. This problem is the home. This problem is the parent. We have to move beyond that. You know, it cannot be that we can do anything after we have invested so much, you know, in resources and salaries and whatever have you. And this Orlando, make this one last point before I give somebody else a chance. The Orlando Patterson report. It is a report rooted in the Jamaican reality, but it has wide-reaching ramifications for a lot of the territories across the Caribbean. And that report found that for the dollar amount, for resources, for salaries, for this, for that, just a very small amount of money, must be 5% or less, went into actual education transformation. You know, we ourselves, Minister Deanne, between the years 2020, 2025, spearheaded an entire education transformation report that we got serious buy-in from all stakeholders. You know, that report is there ready for implementation right as we speak. It gained the support of both sides of the House in 2024 when it was tabled and all of that. But, you know, so we are hopeful that soon we will hear something of that, because all of the issues raised here tonight, that report would have covered, would have interrogated, would have wrestled with suggestions, with open ends of expertise to come in from further afield. Everything is there. And what isn't there is invited even now, because as I recall, we an open document that even today, tomorrow, if somebody, even this conversation, could go into that report, because that was the thinking And that is how we have to think as education being dynamic. Look at what we are wrestling with. We are wrestling with things like AI. We pass now the World Wide Web, which in my view, children, because of a dropping of the ball in 1986, where, however well-intentioned, it may not have been um, piloted, for the want of a better word, in a way that really got the attention and the buy-in of as many stakeholders as possible. So even while we are talking about literacy tonight, even while we are talking about the school leaving qualifications, employers are talking about the students, the young people who are coming to them for interviews with 5 and 8 and 10 and 15 CSEC passes, but cannot deliver themselves, cannot show initiative, cannot articulate, cannot communicate confidently. So the question comes back to what we were talking earlier. What does that ideal Caribbean person look like? How are we preparing our children to go into the workforce confidently? And that ties into labor. When we are going to cry to the labor minister about the number of work permits, but the investors will want value for money. And if the Anguillian worker can do the job, they're going to have to find the work from somewhere. So it is very, very critical that we look at these issues at a very, very basic level. And we haven't even started to talk yet about the social and emotional and those anger issues that are causing our children's blood to drain in the streets. All of that we know ties right back into the sort of experience that we are offering at a very early and tender and vulnerable age. I'll stop there for now.
I want to be able, Lennox, all the other speakers have just said so much, and to be able to pull it together. Let me go back to the point about moving from Valley Secondary School to the comprehensive system. That was in 1986. The next review, the review of the comprehensive system was done in 2009. That's some 20 plus years after it was introduced. Maybe a bit long, but anyhow, it was introduced. It was reviewed. And there were a number of things that came out of that review in 2009. So the last review was in 2009. We're now in 2026. We still got a ways to go to reach 20. Maybe the next review will be in 2029. We don't know.
They had a little one, I think, in 2012.
We had a
2012?
surgical report.
Yeah, the
Okay,
20
great.
and one after that. Yeah. But saying essentially the same things. But
Right.
carry on.
So one of the concerns for me, I remember, like I said, I'm at best in law to education. My wife is in education, so that's her thing. So in the years gone by, you hear about Isle of Wight and the different programs coming out of the UK and so on, and they were adapted and adopted into the Anguilla system. I imagine reviews have been going on with those as well. One of the criticisms when we shifted from Valley Secondary to the comprehensive school is that the teachers, some of them, were continuing to teach the comprehensive students, the students in that system, as if they were still teaching the cream of the crop from the Valley Secondary School years. In the Valley Secondary School, you only had the cream of education coming to the secondary school from grade 6. Those who didn't measure up went on to grade 7 and grade 8 in the primary school system because they weren't considered bright enough to go to the Valley Secondary School. That was the issue at that time. We are now at a crossroads. We were dealing with AI. And the question being asked is, what kind of student is needed for the 2026 workforce? What kind of student? What's the end product that we should be producing to function in a 2026 world? I'm going to give my experience with AI as to how I use it. As a preacher, I would have a library of different books, interpreters' Bibles, and different things where I would need to go and do research about biblical history and different contexts that I need to research in order to assist me interpreting scripture and so on. Those were my resources where I would go to get the information that I need. Now, it is very easy for me to just take up AI and say, okay, give me a sermon. And it does that without me having to think about it. That's easy. But for me, I see AI as those resource books that I have there on my shelf, volumes upon volumes that I'll have to sit down and read for hours to get the information. I can now use AI as my library. And I can ask AI questions that I wanted to ask my interpreter's Bible or my volumes of resources that I have there on the shelf. But I'll have to go and maybe use an index or something to find what I'm looking for. AI can spit it out to me immediately. And I can continue to question AI until AI starts to get fed up of me asking certain questions. And at one point it turned to me and say, Lindsay, it looks like we need to talk about you. Because I was wrestling with it and asking questions that I needed answers to and not just taking anything for granted. So for me, AI is a textbook that I need to read and understand, and I need to ask questions, and I'm going to get immediate responses. So it should be a blessing for students, not to write the essay, but to help me understand what I'm writing, to ask questions that must be asked to improve my knowledge and my understanding of what is happening. AI can be used that way, but our students going to have to be taught to use it that way and not be lazy about its use. So for me, it's a tool that can be used to enhance education, to enhance learning as a resource material to enable students to advance themselves in whatever it is they're studying. So the reviews are important. We take stock of that. How can we use AI to assist our students to best prepare themselves for exams? Because I'm studying a topic for biology, A-level biology, but I don't understand it. I have questions about it. I don't have access to my teacher. AI now becomes my teacher. Look, I understand that capillaries are important to the blood flow system and the rest of it, but I don't understand the connection between that and absorption of oxygen and the rest of it in the bloodstream. Help me understand that. And so I can use AI to enhance my learning and my understanding. As an education system, as we look at AI, instead of being scared of it, there's a world of opportunities there to help students who are not even interested in learning. Because every student has questions. Every student has issues that they are wrestling with and confronting. So now if you can have a student going and looking at how can I use the salt pond and sandy ground to generate electricity? And there's a world of responses you can get from AI to tell you how that can be done. Okay, just giving out a business idea there. But the point is, we have to make, I think, Deanne, you may have made that point about how can we get students to be passionate about learning? It's about learning, not studying to pass an exam, which I did for most of my life until I came to my final year in college. It's only in my final year in college I stopped studying to pass exam, and I started studying to understand. Because I studied philosophy separate from theology, separate from sociology. They were all in their own spheres. Until my final year of college, I understood that the theologians use philosophy And the sociologists use philosophy and theology and different things to combine their theories and to make sense of it all. So it's about how do I pull all these fields together to make sense for me to achieve the level of understanding that I want and the level of learning that I want. So there are opportunities in front of us that our teachers may not even be ready or prepared to deal with. Just like when they switch from common entrance to everybody walking into the high school, teachers were still teaching students who were below par in terms of their ability and their capacity to reproduce what they learn. They may be in band fours, but they were teaching them like band ones because that's what they were trained to do in the Valley Secondary School.
Where
We are
we
now
need
at
them.
another crossroad, and we
Mhm.
have to look at how we equip the teachers to take advantage of the opportunities before us.
I think you and I was actually about to intervene when you were speaking, but you actually circled back and made the point that I wanted to make,
Okay.
which is essentially about our readiness, our ability to be pliable. I'll say that. Maybe I should say that way, our ability to be pliable instead of very rigid. Um, which will allow us to look at systems and say, well, here is how we deal with this. Because while I agree with you, AI has a number of advantages and can break down a concept to which that seemed improbable to some, very simply to others. That is very clear. The problem for me is when you are putting a tool in front of a child at any age, when the child is using that tool, where are the guardrails? One, what what is the type of curiosity that child has already been trained to have? Because I'm telling you now, if that child doesn't genuinely have a curiosity about learning, or I am just curious about how things work, they will not use that tool that could give them so much for for those advantages. That child will use the tool. Give me back. I'm giving you the same questions my teacher asked me this morning. I'm putting those same exact questions in this tool. I'm getting the answers and I'm going to school. I'm not thinking about it. And so the question about all of this even goes back to 1986 when we rolled out this comprehensive system with lofty ideals about what it could give us and what it could do and how and yet we actually stuck to a very academic system. So
I want to jump
go
I
ahead.
want to jump in there if you can, because this is my concern. I was speaking about adaptability. You're speaking to also the need for creativity within the education system. Teachers need to develop more creative ways of teaching. We have a tagline in our Ministry of Education that governs our education sector, coloring outside the lines, which suggests that we have to be able to be more adaptable, to stretch our imagination about what needs to happen in the classroom. Our teachers also need to be probably um, sort of get professional development if they don't have the skills for being to be able to handle differentiated instruction. They need to be able to have the tools for being able to cope with different types of learners within the classroom, right? And so creativity in the pedagogy. We may have persons that have degrees in the content area, but they may not have the pedagogical, updated pedagogical skills, you know? And so I feel that that is one of the missing things because many of our teachers have not necessarily had the retraining. That's the word I was looking for. that is necessary to cope with um, today's 21st century students. And, you know, going back to this issue of AI, um, if a lot of students would have all kinds of tools available to them, but they didn't even know how to ask for the right question to be able to see the information. And so that is a dilemma right there. I was lamenting to a friend the other day, a colleague. I'm finding that our students leaving school are academically immature. And why I say that is that because I interact with fifth formers, sixth formers, and the sort of curiosity, you use that word, the curiosity for learning, the initiative that we need them to have, which will translate into the workforce as well, is missing. And so we have to, however, come right back to the classroom. What is happening in the classroom? Are we still using those old methods of teaching and assessment? Are we still, I believe in what we are seeing is that a lot of our schools and teachers feel pressure to come up with grades, midterm grades, end of term grades. And a lot of our students are being lost in the process. In vocational education, we have a different type of opportunity in called competency-based education and training. A lot of persons are not aware of this, but this is appropriate for students who need to be able to explore, take time to explore a kind of education process where they can develop their skills and learning without the pressure of having to be ready for a test when everybody is ready. Because that's the issue. We're not all the same. Everybody's not moving at the same pace. So we need to be able to have different instructional approaches. And one of them is competency-based education training, where we can always delve into a little bit more. But the principles basically is that it is fit for developing skills. But what I understood is that in Canada, that is something that's now fundamentally used at the primary level, because there's a recognition that all students are not going to get to the finish line at the same time. And so we need to have an atmosphere, a classroom atmosphere, where students can develop at their time and pace. And that is something that's killing. You see, the high flyers will always be able to do that. What about that 50%? We have to cater to the 50% that's just not making the grade, right? And so our pedagogical skills are important. Our teachers need to retool and get new ways, be more curious, find out innovative ways of teaching. Some persons want to do what they did 10 years ago, use the same lesson plans. Can you imagine that? Oh, I've been teaching for 30 years. And so today, I'm going to teach today like I taught 20 years ago. You know, that doesn't work. And that is why a lot of our students are disengaged. We need to understand the type of young people we have. We have to engage them. We have to appeal to their different types of learning. Visual learners, some need to be kinesthetic, they need to be more holistic in our approach in the classroom. And so this is why I find we are missing and losing a lot of our students by the way we teach. Because the way we teach is the way we are teaching them how to learn.
Right.
And that is something that I did with my master's research. The way we teach is the way they will learn. And so if we teach passively, if we teach lazily, we're only developing learners who are passive and lazy, you know? So that is just one of my takes on that. And with the whole AI thing, a lot of tools can be there. There's Khan Academy. There have been so many ways that students can help themselves. But guess what? They didn't even know where to, because somehow they have missed that ability to be curious and in the forefront of teaching and allowed students to become more independent learners. That is something that's missing as well. So that's just my little take on teaching and learning, but I tend to have a passion on that because I think for me, what happens in the classroom is that's where the rubber hits the road. And so when we don't hold our teachers accountable to what they're doing in the classroom, then the whole thing goes awry. Yeah. So I believe Lennox can bear me out on that as well. Okay, in terms of he's been a recent classroom teacher. And how we how we shape our students is really in the hands of the teacher. I'll pause on that one.
Well, definitely. I was going to bear you out on a couple things there, Marian, because I was going to ask if you remembered a few years ago when we were marking CXC and the student turned up with a rap composition talking about creativity. And we were kind of shuffling around to know how we got to mark this rap, you know. but it really pushed the envelope at that time.
And I am
So
sure my response was, we'll have to find a way to mark it.
that was their response indeed. Yeah, yeah, because and that is what is happening. It children will, with the right set of circumstances, as you were saying, will find a way to push the system to be relevant to what is happening in these times. So all of I wanted to circle back to even what Rev was saying about the how he used AI. Now we realize that to use AI in that way, which is a way of integrity, it isn't shady, it isn't lazy, but then where is the literacy of our students to be able to reason, to be able to read, to be able to know, as you said, as Dee said, to know what to look for, in the research. And that is what is happening. The other thing is, as creative, sometimes as teachers want to get, they feel bound by the requirements of the exam. I mean, there's no getting away from it. Not only the teachers, the parents want to know that the parents will buy up every exam paper, every exam resource from all over the world to make sure, because they did a research and they see that they probably use AI too. They probably saw that over the past 15 years, the history paper can have something on the sugar industry and slavery. And they want to point the children there because the children need to get a award, because you say that they have award ceremonies and so on to deal with, to deal with. Now, it may sound light as I'm bringing it over, but these are the serious ramifications and results of what is not fit for purpose, in my view, for an education system in 2026 and moving forward. The other thing I wanted to touch on is this whole issue of banding. I'm not sure what they do in Antigua, but I could tell you that the banding in Anguilla has caused such an emotional scourge on children that even now that I'm back in the classroom for a little while, that children still walk up to you and try to find out if music is banded. Music was banded here for the better part of my career, music. So the children will come and ask you, teacher, what band this is. I used to tell them that this is Better Band. And the thing is, we had a band here on the island called Better Band, so they would have a chuckle with that. But I couldn't bring myself to discussing this whole idea of banding. Sometimes when you mention places like Finland and Singapore and so on, people get bristly. But Finland recognizes every single child to be a special needs child, because you have to take care of all the needs of all the children. And we're coming back to places like Antigua, but more like Anguilla when it comes to population. Why are we doing these things to our children with one high school? And we, since 1986, we would have been encouraging and welcoming every single 12-year-old or 11-year-old, God, how they make the birthday, um, to the high school. And I don't think, in the sake of repetition, that we would have paid enough attention, at least not until this comprehensive education transformation report, to what children are feeling and how children are turned off. You know, just recently I had an experience with a child here where if you didn't read the situation sensitively, you would believe that the child was defiant or rude. Had an assignment to do, showed no interest, was already getting defensive, and we were able to talk to the student and only to find out that literacy skills are poor. But was playing it off in a kind of way because you don't want it. The thing is, it is better to seem rebellious than to not know, you know, and that has been going on for decades. And so it ties right back to why the anger, why the violence, why the disengagement. There's a certain integrity that as young teachers and in service and so on, that is the first thing that you learn. You have to be true to students. What they tell us, when you don't know something and children ask you, well, so what about this? Teacher, what about that? And you don't know. Tell them you don't know, and then you go away, you find it out, have them do their own research, and we come back and we collaborate. We are seeming to, in this dispensation, to be losing that compassion and that empathy and that realness in the way of the relationship with our students and what we are really supposed to be sharing with them, we ourselves as lead learners, not as the bastions of education any longer. And those are the things in part of my career, I have been known to give children high marks, for example. In music, children could talk about pop culture, uh, different composers, and the backstories about music. I would never be able to keep up with these things. You can go because they can write a pentatonic scale, ascending, some chromatic scale without key signature that you give them 20%. What does that do to in a way of music and music education and appreciation, just as an example? So we see that, yes, we have a long way to go in terms of making children feel empowered, making them feel that their knowledge is valued. And then we could move from there to really bring them in gently and sensitively to what we feel we need them to know so that they could embrace AI, so that they could embrace the other technologies and really make something of themselves.
Lennox, if I can, I just wanted to piggyback on something you raised, the issue of banding students. We have done something similar with universal secondary education, where we use level 1, level 2, level 3. So based on the grade 6 assessment, students will be placed accordingly. And when they go to the schools will know, well, they were level 3 students, or they were level 4 on level 1, and that sort of thing. And I agree with you that that creates a problem, because I'm going to tell you why. The assessment at grade 6 is based on 4 subjects. But that doesn't take into consideration that I may be a level 1 music person, but somehow I might be level 3 when I come out of grade 6, or I may be excellent construction because my parents and my environment has me already wired to doing things in construction. And so what I understand the issue of literacy and numeracy, but we have a problem because many children feel down, especially in mathematics, because the way it was taught at primary school, so they didn't get it. But given an opportunity to see how it's related to their area of interest and passion, it could be cooking, culinary skills, but we need to be able to link literacy and numeracy to other areas of interest. And I think sometimes we are not interested enough as the school to find out what are the hobbies and interests these children might be bringing from primary school. They might be excellent at sports. And that is where the money is at the end of the day, right? And so how can we link the human and social biology to sports? How can we, I went to Barbuda the other day. Barbuda is very similar to Anguilla. As a small country, one school, one primary, one secondary. And they have decided to enhance Tibet in their secondary school situation. So they have a culinary program, they have cosmetology, they have now added HVAC as programs to enhance what the students are able to get. And I sat in a class of cosmetology, and I was amazed. Students were there from Form 1 to Form 4. And I was amazed the depth of learn about the skin and the social human biology that was in that lesson. But guess what? Even though they were in second form and the level of the learning content, they were into it. They could respond to the teacher. And so these are some of the authentic ways of teaching that are missing in some cases where they do not see the connections of what they're learning and the real life interests that they have. And one of the things that we are trying to investigate, I have made a proposal in Antigua for turning some of our traditional secondary schools, what they call them grammar schools or comprehensive schools, into vocational education, vocational secondary schools. Because what I have observed is that we could be offering, and it's not about having any stigma attached to these schools. It is big students would want to go to these schools because they have an interest in the approach, the CBET approach, an approach where the students, instead of talking about so much about English, but we're dealing with communication. We're dealing with numeracy through the programs that would be offered. And so and St. Lucia has already embarked on that model that we are looking at closely, because when you're talking about that 50%, and could be even more, we have to have a different type of schooling for them. You see, if you try to get too much of the vocational education process, the CBET process, can't be so timetable that the students don't have enough time to explore the skills and get practical skills. So what we've been trying to do, what we want to do is to create this environment where the students can get into their passions. If I'm interested in music, performing arts, I go to a particular school. If I'm interested in agriculture, this is the school and so on. And you may have to have some mixed programs and so on. But the whole idea is that it will be a different type of schooling experience. It's like we can't, you see, the traditional school program, if you just try to change some of the ideas, it's like putting new wine into old skins, and so it doesn't work. There is this tension. I don't know how many of you are aware of CXC offers the Caribbean vocational qualifications. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but a lot of people are clamoring now for those sorts of qualifications because it can now address students who can get certified in skill areas And a lot of our young people are interested in the skilled areas, and they need the certification and the qualifications to be able to go on. And so I'm just saying that, when we talk about making changes, that's one of we have to have the cahoots to make radical changes to our system, because we can't try to pour into the tradition culture. There's a traditional grammar school comprehensive culture, but we have to change it systemically, right, for it to work. And these are just some of the ideas that we are trialing. We are looking at what St. Lucia is doing. Dominica is looking at what St. Lucia is doing, St. Vincent. So, we have to learn from each other across the Caribbean as well, right? And I'm just sharing some of the things that we're doing, what Barbuda is doing, because there is a recognition that our young people want to be more engaged. There is a dilemma with the CSEC, many of the CSEC programs, even in vocational areas, where it tends to be more theoretical and less practical. Our 21st century students are asking for a more practical learning space. But the timetable of 35 minutes or 40 minutes a period doesn't cut it to allow them to be more practically engaged. So, that is something we have to address. And I am saying, where is the political will to be able to make those sort of radical changes? And we cannot be afraid to make those changes, because we didn't go through a school system like that. So we have to have the cahoots from somewhere. Right, Jan?
I agree with you completely. I agree with you completely. And I think it's very interesting what you brought up, because I recently had a conversation with a close friend of mine, and um she's saying we need a theater arts school here in Anguilla. And it came as a result of a wider conversation that we were having about the ability to use areas that children are already interested in to tap into and to break it down into things that they probably don't even know is relevant. So when I see a young man who could bend it like Beckham on a football field, if I can tell him and explain to him that what he's doing is physics, and then he can understand the physics of his own body, the physics of the force on the ball, then you can see the synapses firing. You could see the interest being piqued, because I mean, you tap into their innate competitive nature, their want and their drive to do better, to win a game. You pick up some kids and you bring them in a theater arts school, and you have a play where they have to then model conflict situations that they've never been in before, and then have to actually consider, well, how would I feel about this? That's building those little soft skills, the conflict resolution, the ability to connect with people and sit in other people's shoes rather than simply looking at the world from their own perspective. And that is the idea. That's the idea that's kind of birth how she and I were talking about, well, why don't we build a school around the skills and then bring in the theory, bring in the basics and build.
Exactly what I'm saying. And I'm glad you talked about performing arts, because I keep telling persons, look, a lot of those children don't want to read anymore. English B is suffering. But guess what? If you flip the coin, theater arts can assist with engendering the same curiosity and creativity, developing oral skills, because at the end of the day, it's not about English, English, English. It's about communication. It's about developing your oral skills, your memory to be able to deliver and that sort of thing. And theater arts is amazing, because the children have to learn to collaborate with each other. It develops creativity, the same creative thinking that we're trying to get. It's right there inherent in the subject,
Right,
right? And
right.
same thing for music. When we talk about wanting students who are creative, if you don't have these subject areas, where they're going to get their creativity. The
Right.
whole concept of design.
Right. Right.
Design cuts across all the arts, construction, architecture. So the whole aspect of creativity and design is right across all the TVET
Right.
areas. And
And you
so
know,
I'm going to make a big plug
no, you don't have to
for
plug for
TVET
me.
vocational education. It
I
will
know,
solve a lot of our issues.
we completely agree. But it's about that connection, because that's what you're building for that. And sorry, I use the wrong word. That engagement. We go back to what Mr. Vanterpool was saying. Like when in COVID-19, when people were, okay, you come in, you see a student in one of the boxes. All right, they're present. I tick you. That means they were learning. No, they probably were not even engaged. They probably were not even engaged. So you start to understand what is the essential, the thing that is bringing out their interest in what they're learning, and teaching them to love learning. But I wanna raise something that, the Education Task Force report really emphasized, and I think it's something that we don't talk about a lot. And it's having a very negative impact on our young people, which is we don't have high expectations of our young people anymore. And they know you don't have any expectations of them. So they don't have anything. If you have zero expectations of me, expect your expectations to be met. You don't have to, you won't be disappointed. I will meet your expectations. And so this is something that we really do have to work on actively, because having high expectations, and I think this is the reality of life. When we have expectations, when we hope for something, it opens the ground for disappointment. Yes. But disappointment is important. Disappointment is a part of what tells us that we care. We care about something. And our young people are understanding that nobody has any expectations of them. So people don't care about them. And so they don't care about anything. Have a conversation with some of these young people. Have a conversation.
Absolutely.
They're protecting
Absolutely.
themselves. They're protecting themselves by not caring.
Absolutely.
They do not want to be hurt.
Yeah. We ever see you shaking your head
All
while
right.
Dee was speaking? I don't know if you wanted to jump in. I wasn't cutting you off, Dee, but I
Just,
No,
saw
no, no,
Rev
no,
just,
no, no,
shaking.
no, no, no.
I saw
just
Rev shaking his head as if he wanted to comment.
Not so much comment, it's just a bunch of things running through my head, and they're so on point because 5, 10 years ago, I would have said, we're talking about expectations. Um, our young men were leaving high school, not really interested in passing, because many of them would have made the comment to me and say, I don't need the education, I just need an educated woman. That was the conversation. And yeah, you got an educated woman with a good job. I don't even need to go work. I drive her car, drop her to work, and I go pick her up. I stay home, I mind the children. So there was no motivation, no expectation of me as a young man. All I need to do is stay home, go on the corner, do what I got to do, and whatever I do on the corner. So that expectation thing was there. Now, what is the expectation in 2026? Right? Um, what do we want? What do the young men want? Well, I need to stay alive. The expectation is about stay. In the past, young men would use the thing, boy, I got a child now. I gotta hold it together. I gotta keep my head on. I gotta focus on my child, getting a job, providing for my child. No, because a lot of the young men who end up in prison, they have young children. So how come that responsibility isn't strong enough to keep me focused on being positive instead of living a life that is so scary. And I'm bringing all this pain and hurt and suffering and fear and despair into my family. Whether I end up in prison or I end up at two sons. That's another part of the reality that we're now seeing among young people playing out in our streets, playing out in the school. And it's not just young men anymore, it's our young ladies. They're not afraid to be fighting and doing whatever else in the schools now. So we're talking about expectations and the hopes and the dreams and the rest of it. We have a lot to do in terms of being able to engage these young people in a way where they can see the need. Boy, I still got a future, you know. I can do something with this life of mine. But many of them would have lost hope because they are so afraid that if I open the window, somebody gonna shoot me. So that hope of life, that hope of a future, we don't think that far, right? Because I don't have that sense of a long life or a bright future. And when I look at my child, I don't know what is evoked within them when they look at their young children. What is stored up within them when they drop their child off to school? What is there going on in the head? Are they thinking, am I going to be here for this child's graduation? What's going on in the back of the heads of our young people, and how is that affecting their children, which are now coming through the school system? So it's the home, it's the school, and it's all of us. Got to somehow work out how that puzzle is going to be assembled together to create a framework that hold our children and our young people focus on what is important in life. Um, the Valley Secondary School system was one where who is bright enough to succeed? The comprehensive system is what do we need to do for each child to make each child succeed? And when you answer that question, you got to look at the pastoral issues in terms of what is going on in their lives personally. Somebody has to be engaging the child on a personal level. Okay, we got feeding programs coming into the school. We're dealing with the transportation, with the public, the school bus system and everything else. There are other things that affect the child that prevents them from learning and creating that curiosity. I spoke about how I use AI, but then someone mentioned the point, but you got to know what to ask.
You got to know how to read.
You got to know how to read.
You got to know how to
You
read.
got to know these are the basic things that it come down to. And so it's about going back to basics. Now, what are the basics? We have our primary school where I see children pulling suitcases going to school with their books. Why? Maybe they got 10, 15 subjects doing in primary school. They're doing stuff in primary school that I learned in Form 2 in high school. Maybe they are at that age and at that stage. But these reviews that we are looking at, it took 20-something years to review the comprehensive system. These reviews gonna have to be done in a shorter space of time because by time we do a review, the last one you say was 2014. So that's more than 10 years ago. What transpired in Anguilla in the last 10 years? And how has the school adapted to produce a student that the Anguilla business needs today? We have to produce a student, first of all, who's going to stay alive. What are we doing in that regard? So there are just so many facets to it. So it isn't just government, it isn't just teachers, it's not just the education system. And yes, finance comes into there, the budget and all that kind of stuff. But we have to prioritize what is it we are going to focus on. We can't maybe fix everything one time, but let us try fix something. We can't try to spread ourselves too thin, but can we fix one thing? We spoke about the TVET. We know when I left high school, I had guys in construction who were making twice the salary I was making, and I was in a fancy job in Bank of America. Yeah, National Bank. But they were making twice my salary in a week that I was getting in a month. What's the scenario? What's the situation today? What does the workforce require today? And then you got a whole heap of other things going on now. Employers are getting savvy. If I can get this job done for $50, why must I pay you $80 to get the same job done when I can pay somebody else 50 and they don't mind the 50? All these have to be taken into consideration when we're looking at the overall picture. Hence, ongoing reviews are going to be necessary to see what other variables are coming into the picture that have to be taken into consideration when we are going to revamp, when we are going to reform, when we are going to radically reform education. An interesting thought that came to me as Dee was speaking. There are so many instances in America where you have a radically minded educator who feels, I have to do education different. The system isn't going to do it. I'm going to start my own school, use my own thinking, my own methods, my own strategies, my own modus operandi, my own whatever system of pedagogy. And I'm going to use this in my school completely different from what the established system does, and to see if it works. To some extent, they are successful, but are we radical enough to adopt them? It was something that became very, very forceful to me within the context of the church. You can have a very radical minister within the church, but as soon as that radical minister gets in position, he has to abide by the laws and the rules established in the church. He can leave your radicalism out there on the street because you can't bring it in here. You are bound to obey the established rules and laws. So can the system really function in a radical way to bring about what we are saying? Or do we have to have some radical educators who are going to go out there and put themselves on the line to make it happen?
It's a good question. It's a good question. I think it's possible. But again, what needs to happen is, and this is the challenge of operating in small systems. It's also a gift, but you have to understand, and this is something a fellow, a ministerial colleague of mine in BVI, Shari De Castro, she and I were very, very close. Young ministers in education. And Shari said something to me in 2020, end of 2023, beginning of 2024. She said, if you have a vision like you do in education, there will be people who will not buy into your vision. Your responsibility is to the children of your country. And so, and that's all she said, but there was a message behind that. And the message is, we have a responsibility to execute. Either you get on board with us in executing this vision, or you get off. And the reason why I said it's a challenge in small communities is because our political systems are developed in a way that make it very difficult for you to enact the type of changes you need in education. And this, well, Anguilla system is very different to me, to Antigua, and a number of our other OECS partners, because the public service is under the remit of the UK Office of the Governor. And so the tension there is in having our, I don't know how to refer to them. Having our external partners recognize the urgency of what we are trying to accomplish and to have them act in accordance. Because at some point in time, this is going to have to come down now to us saying, well, if you don't want to make the changes, you are now going to be personally responsible. Because that's really and truly how you have to move when you have the responsibility for all these people on your hands. And I mean, it takes, if I could say, if I could look back in time and say, over my time as Minister of Education, what I would have regretted not doing, you know, I would have, as part of the education task forces, members of the opposition sat and were part of the education task force, shaping where we wanted education to go. The whole opposition supported the education task force report. And I'm wondering if I had a further responsibility to go and sit down in their houses, to knock on their doors and sit down on their porches and say, if y'all don't get y'all people up and everybody get to work here. Because that's how urgently I think about the issue of education. That's how I think about the problem. And I think about the problem in terms of, you know, it's so easy for us to blame and to point, but when do we stop? That's the Marian asked the question about political will. Well, it goes past political will. It goes to political maturity. Because you have to be able to see the vision for those children beyond your political career. Our political careers might be short, maybe long, whatever. It doesn't matter. There are people who hang in the balance of your decisions, and that is what makes politics such an important part of this conversation. That's how I looked at it. That's how I felt. That's when Mr. Vanterpool driving this task force report, getting all of this buy-in, and then for the report to sit there, it feels personal. I don't know. I'm sure Mr. Vanterpool has his own feelings, but there's a reason why there was so much effort put in. Because we know the cost on the other side. So again, you know, what will it take? Can the system take it? Are we pouring new wine into old skins? Those questions? Well, we need to become like crocodiles and shed our skins. We need to shed the skins in order to move forward.
There are two areas I want prepared to discuss tonight, which you have been skirting around. And um, and we're still colonies, whatever
Yes.
word you want to use, right?
Yeah. Well,
And they have a way of molding and shaping and manipulating and feeding and nurturing and twisting and turning and etc. So as much as we may want to be radical, that can only manifest itself in one or two ways. We committing political suicide or whatever suicide, or we becoming so radical to do something very drastic and say, Mommy, I'm moving out. I'm going to rent my own apartment. That's one. The other part of it that I am not prepared to touch is the whole notion of how much party politics can trap you into not being able to be radical
Mm,
because you got to toe the line.
mm.
You belong to a system of which, yeah. And so those are the things that I think have trapped us and bound us as a people over the years. And you talk about um, surviving your political career, your term in office. Do you do what you need to do for the sake of the people, or is your eye on the clock? Okay, I got 2 more years in power. I got to get back in power, so I can't touch that now.
Listen,
Those are critical questions which affect whether or not, as a people, we can mature and move to the next level where we need to move to save our children.
yep,
And you're on it. Maybe
yep.
like I said, I am outside of this box completely. So I may be bold and brave enough to say, and I really don't care to say it. But I think that's a reality that most persons in the education system um, are maybe not prepared to come up against.
Right. And I agree with you that that is a very difficult question for most people, and most people will consider or will have more nearsighted perspectives on certain matters of that nature.
Yeah.
But it's again, and maybe it is my personality, and I've been very fortunate to have colleagues who I think feel very similar to me about these issues.
Mm.
And I feel fortunate for that. And but at the same time, how we teach our students and where our society is, it's reflective in how our society responds to certain things. We're here having a conversation about, the fact of being a colony, and the fact of not being a colony is about taking care of yourself. Well, how do your people respond to the idea of them being responsible for themselves? If your people respond violently to the idea of being responsible for themselves, well, how do we then have the conversation with young people about being responsible for themselves?
Mm.
It is a question that stuns me sometimes when I see the response of grown adults to the idea of we are becoming independent in our thought, in our actions, in our finances, and then they respond violently to that. And then the young people are being told and advocated to in our schools. Well, we must learn independence and financial independence and critical thinking. How will they learn?
Yeah.
How will they learn? Please enlighten me.
Mm.
Mr. V, am
Yeah.
I wrong in asking
Yes,
the question?
I am.
The defense rests.
I am. I am almost afraid of sullying this conversation.
You won't sully it.
The, the, the thing is, as I listen, I recall the seminal work of Michael Fullan, Leading in a Climate of Change. And the first point he made there is moral purpose. Moral purpose. And when DU and Rev were talking about the trappings of colonialism, the trappings of the party political issue, and then you realize that you juxtapose that against even our good ideas, as Marian mentioned, about how we move the TVET forward and the ideas for skills development and so on. And right here in Anguilla, even if you manage to get a good electrician, a good plumber, then we are now grappling with the idea that that person may not find work because they cannot drive or walk or ride into certain areas where that work is. That is where we are in Anguilla. So to talk about the importance of urgent action, I mean, we are way past that. And that is why when Rev mentioned that it is not only government, it is not only the school, it is not only these, but it's all of us. Yes, that's true, but somebody has to lead it.
Yeah.
And if governments change, or if governments, or if parties, or movements, or whatever we call them, would raise their hand to be leaders of our country, it means leadership on either side. Leadership to stand up to the British, leadership to stand up for your vulnerable children who don't have a voice for themselves. So that when we put all of these good education initiatives in place, so that when we finally find out what is the good mix between TVET and academics, between the creative arts and sciences and whatever have you, then how are we going to make that work on behalf of our children and for the betterment and advancement of Anguilla, or for Antigua, or for the wider Caribbean? Where is that moral purpose? And then the responsibility of the public. Because when we see that same child at 5 years old do well on the CPEA, and they get a trophy for the performance, and they move up to high school and they win the debating competition, we come back and we applaud them. And then they are part of the student government and the youth parliament. And we say, yes, that's our leader. But leave that same person have the conviction enough to go for political office because of a conviction to do right by other young people, or for some conviction that they want to. Let's say education. And then you become public enemy number one. For some, not all. And this is the dilemma. This is the tension that we find ourselves in. This is where the maturity, all words that we have all so eloquently mentioned this evening. This is where we are at. But is it enough to cause us to sit on our hands, or throw them up as the case may be, and say, boy, I want with this? The blood of our children is draining in the streets. We can't afford to be nonchalant and to look the other way on this issue, on any issue that will pertain to youth and well-being and education. I've seen some signs that we may be out of time, so I can stop there for now.
Oh, I ain't get those things yet because I want to before we close off, right? I want someone sent me a thought they were having because we're looking at the effects of the effect of the students. So the person who threw the thought to me was like, what if the educators are burnt out? They spoke about earlier, I think in our introduction, about some people contributing so much to the system that eventually they get burnt out. But what about what if educators are burnt out? And are the educators given enough tools to motivate them to produce for our students? Because we talk about what the students need and what the students getting, but there's somebody have to provide these things for the students. So one, are the educators burnt out? And are we giving them enough tools and motivation to do the job that needs to be done? And as usual, I mean, it's been exciting so far. So anyone just jump in
I
and
have
go
a
with it.
controversial thought here. And it goes back
I
to
love that.
it goes back to accountability, essentially, right? Um, and let me butter up the controversial thought so that I'm not going straight in, I'll butter you up to it, right? We talk about accountability, and how it is necessary for us to be able to move forward. I have seen educators who've given their life force to education. I mean, the generations of students who are taught by Mr. Colin Johnson owe him a debt of gratitude. You know, people, you have educators who have definitively brought a spark into education. And I have seen where their sparks have started to falter. And there's nothing, I don't think there's anything as painful as seeing someone who you know had the ability to see a student. You know, the most profound thing that a teacher can do for a child is really see them, like really see them, because nobody else sees me, but my teacher sees me. So I come in and I'm like, teach, and you could feel that child. I mean, I was only a teacher when at primary school level for half a year many years ago. But that experience was foundational for me. And these teachers who are burnt out, who feel the need for support, my controversial thought is this. We need to bring in administrators to administer education systems and let master teachers continue to be master teachers and reward them for being master teachers instead of taking our master teachers out of our education system and putting them in administration as a reward for them being master teachers. Is that simple enough?
You
That's
would
very
just say
clear.
that
That's what,
slowly again, would you?
Deanne, that is what we have done in Antigua. Our teachers union advocated for that several years ago. And so because we were losing good people like me into administration long time ago, but then they realized that there are some people who don't want to be in administration, are master teachers or senior teachers who are able to support what's happening at the school level. And they do get paid, and recognized for that. And so these are the persons who are able to do professional development at the school level, and support younger teachers, etc. So I agree with you. And if allow me to just finish this point, I agree with you that a lot of our teachers need support. Our younger teachers are burning out fast because they too are not feeling the support. And this is critical because they need to get feedback. When you sometimes just going, and nobody gives you real positive feedback, or you don't feel that you are supported by others. And also to find support outside of your territory. That can help, because I can tell you, when I started music, I was like a lone ranger. I was the only person starting music, but I had I found colleagues in Barbados and Trinidad and so on. And that's was, and then I've been a friend to Anguilla for many years, right, Lennox? So we need to be able to not feel isolated as teachers. That can kill us, right? And it's not just always financial support, but there's some other non-financial things, support that teachers require, right? And on the note, Pastor said it before, I wanted to make this point. I agree with the pastoral care. Many of our students just want to know that somebody cares, that addresses them with respect, because it's not a one-way street where respect is due. Our students sometimes feel disrespected by their teachers or administrators, just the manner in which people speak to them. They want to know that they're somebody too. And I have found in my practice that just having one-on-ones with a lot of these young people goes a long way. And a lot of teachers can do simple things the first 15 minutes when you're marking register. Share nuggets, get the students to share. And I think that has become, everybody's gotten so busy in the school system that the students don't get to be heard. And that's something that especially the males that is something very important for them. So I just wanted to support Pastor, what you had said about pastoral care, and the fact too that many teachers need to also understand that sometimes they have to step into the space of being surrogate parents, right? Unfortunately, but sometimes that is required. And we just have to do what we have to do. But on the note of burnt out, that's a whole topic unto itself that maybe somebody else can address. But I kind of try to make some recommendations as to how we can support teachers. Not always financial is what they need, but just that moral support from the administrators.
I want to
Pastor,
just,
over to you.
yeah, I want to just reflect on the controversial thoughts, so-called. I've never thought about it in that way, even though I know of persons who moved from the classroom to the office, and every day they are crying to go back to the classroom because that's what they were called to. That's their calling, to be engaging students. Now, how can that become a reality when we're in a system where, for my career as an educator, I must end up as a chief education officer? That's the goal. So I may be a teacher, I go to senior teacher, I become principal, and then I go to the Department of Education. That shows progress. That shows I'm developing my career as an educator. But personally, I want to be in the classroom. So I can support that controversial thought. It will require the education system, the Ministry of Education, change, perhaps creating some kind of divide between administration and pedagogy, the teaching practice, so that I am not striving to become chief education officer. I'm striving to become a member of SNT. I'm becoming the principal or deputy principal or whatever. And I don't need to cross the street to go to the education department for that, because I'm not interested in sitting behind a desk and writing policies and that kind of a stuff. But then perhaps there may be some package that needs to be there to motivate me to stay in teaching, and not me being in a situation where I cannot fulfill all my dreams in life unless I go across the street to the education department and start being an administrator. So it may be controversial, I don't know to what extent, but it's worth a thought. And it's going to take the teachers to say, look, I'm prepared to remain in the school. Just give me a package that is commensurate with what's happening over in the education department. Because what we are doing here is as critical, even more critical than what's happening over in the education department. And you need us in the school engaging the students, because my calling is to my students, not to the system, to my students. And you have teachers like that who will never give, even though they cross the street and go to the education department, they have evening classes. Yeah? So that's where the passion is. So I don't know if it is controversial. It may be for some people, but if you find the teachers who have that passion to engage with students and not be behind a desk pushing papers and policies and the rest of it, let's make it worthwhile for them to stay there and to feel fulfilled and satisfied. You know, that'll be my take on that. Yeah.
Teach, Mr. Vanderpool, you want to jump in on
Yes, I would have to agree with that. Although the whole package thing now, I might be a little late for that, personal. But definitely, all I was just while Rev was talking, and then when D raised it, I thought about where we have gone in the passage of time, that teachers will now, in the need for the support and whatever, where they would be now, and even to take up what package would be enough, not to say in terms of the money value, but teaching now has become really, really challenging, not because it had to be, in my view, but because we have done so little remedial work and so little supportive work over the years, um, from 1986 especially to now. When I published Broken Cards in 2016, that was a call then, 10 years ago, for urgent action in the way of education, not only because of the way that things were being done, but because of the results, the negative results that we were seeing, on in a whole range of issues. And all in peril is loss, in the words of Banker Banks's Prince of Darkness. But the struggle is real, and we see it every day where I am. Teachers talk about it, young teachers, um, many of whom I taught, and they are coming into the system now, and older ones too. And we have to move. Many people, as sometimes is the custom here in Anguilla, they wouldn't really make a big thing about it. They wouldn't go on a program such as this or on the radio. But the concerns are there, and people are interested. We want to be able to make a difference. We want to be a part of the remedy for what it means to save our youth insofar as there are still there are some very, very beautiful souls in these schools up and down the system. But with the right, as we have discussed here, with the right attention and with the right nurture, with the right care, the right support services. But that is where, as I mentioned before, that is where the moral purpose comes in. Is where understanding change and collaboration and having relationships. And that is why it is so important to slow things down. That is one of the findings, again, in the transformation report, to slow things on the academic side, because what good really is a successful, quote unquote, academic performance if we are losing the souls of our children and the souls of our nation. So that is what I would say to that for now.
All right.
I
We
make
have.
one final comment from me.
Go ahead, Rev.
A radical thought. I'm not too au fait with what's happening in the primary school, but somewhere along the line, I heard they're like teaching biology and sciences and different things and the curriculum in the primary school. I may be wrong, forgive me if it is. But if it is, I would say get it out of the curriculum. Let's focus on the English, the reading, the maths, the pronunciation, the penmanship, the basics of learning in primary school, and leave the biology to high school.
Our college.
Okay.
We talked about slowing it down, right? Let's slow it down. Let's go back to the basics. We have children in high school. We have people in the workplace who cannot write a sentence, a proper sentence.
And Rev, that might be a good segue into my last question because we have about 6 more minutes to go. And I know the producer, he's very tight on time and he docks my pay for every minute we go over. So I want to get but I want to get his question in and then also get you guys closing remarks within the next 6 minutes. But because a lot has been mentioned tonight about the readiness of what we are putting into the workforce. And I think it's while we have you guys, I think it's important for that to be touched because what is school preparing you for, if not life after school, if not adulthood? So how are we seeing what are we producing that's going out into the workforce and who this overall responsibility for in terms of getting students ready for the workforce? Is it the ministry? Is it the department? Is it the teachers? Is it the government? Is it the House of Assembly? Who is ultimately responsible? And yeah, as usual, just jump in.
Well, looking at it, I would say, as I mentioned earlier, I would feel that the leaders of the day, when we spearheaded this education question from way back 2016, 2017 as the force, nobody asked my colleagues and myself to do this work. Again, there was a work, a labor of love. And here's where Minister Deanne at the time, after we moved through different areas and offices without much success, she embraced the idea and we were able to move into what is now the Education Transformation Report. You know, that showed leadership, the present administration. That is why I'm still hopeful because the present administration as it stands would have, apart from one of our members on that task force in the person of Honorable Jose Vanterpool, would have had, and the present sitting Minister of Education, the Honorable Premier would have served as Education Minister, and so would have the Honorable Senior Ministerial Assistant, Evans McNeil Rogers. So the present administration is what the old people call chock full of education expertise, for the want of a better term, to move the education transformation report, to move the whole question, however they want to frame it. But I'm sure that persons listening to us tonight will go away with at least, if nothing else, the idea of the urgency of addressing and further conversation on this. And then see what is, I mean, we haven't spoken really at length about what is actually happening in the school. We hear about those. We may not hear about a lot of them now, but there was a time when we were hearing about instances and anecdotal evidence of negative behavior in the schools almost every day, more than once a day, And so it shows that we have the power within us to make a difference if we want. And we had that whole conversation earlier about the expensive effort, what we are thinking that it would cost us. But it can cost us to do something about this more than it would cost us not to do. And that is how I would frame it for now. But others could certainly jump in.
I guess my contribution would be focus on TVET. I mean, there are other things, the pastoral and other issues, but I feel the time has come for the TVET program, the whole profile of it, to be lifted to a level that is where everybody wants to be in the TVET program. The profile needs to be lifted, the importance, the significance of it, the value of it. Marrying it just like you would marry English to a law student. What is it about TVET that we can offer our students? Remember, we dropping in our seat. Why? Where is that 50% or that 60%? Where have they gone? Can they be absorbed in the TVET program and elevated to a status where it's admirable, it's desired, it's envied, and people can see the value of having a certificate in a TVET course. And the workforce, the community is saying, I need students with TVET passes. I remember the years when I was in Jamaica. The students who were at university had this academic mindset that, I'm in academia. The people who were in CAST at the time, College of Art, Science, and Technology, it's a university now, the workplaces were clamoring for the people who are going to CAST. They were of more value to them in the job space than the academic student coming out of UE. Why? Because they had more practical, applicable skills that they needed in the workforce. Yeah? So they were those students who were more desired, who did the TVET programs, who did the arts and sciences. And that's because the environment was created to desire them. What are we doing as a community, as a nation, as a private sector, or whoever, and saying, I don't just want somebody with a degree in economics or a degree in business management or a degree in accounting. Give me somebody with some practical skills that can give my company to take it to the next level. And so I want skilled people who are not trapped in one little cubicle, but who can move around on the floor, inspire others, encourage, enable others, educate others in the various spheres of their work on the workplace, because they have the skills, whether it's electronic, electrical, plumbing, carpentry, engineering, they're working with robots, whatever it is. Yes, we're expanding now to cosmetology and the rest of it. And that is critical. And I see it's being introduced into the education system now. Because it's perhaps the most lucrative industry right now among young people, young women, cosmetology. Because they're changing everything about themselves to look good. And the demand is there. TVET needs to be fast-tracked. They need to double their money being invested in it. They need to ensure that enough scholarships are there for people to go and train and come back and teach the TVET courses. That needs to be the AI of education, the TVET program. And I believe that will make a difference. That will make a difference in the future of education and producing people for the workforce. In my days in Jamaica, there was a heart program where people attended in order. There were those who just went to, you can't go to CAS, you can't go to university, you go to the heart program. Because when you left the heart program, every hotel in the area wanted you to work for them, because you were given the tools necessary to function within the hotel industry. Do we have a heart program in Jamaica, in Anguilla? And why don't we? Since the 80s, we have been promoting tourism as our number one thing. Where is the heart program in Anguilla? The program that equip our young people to be at the front desk, to be in the spa, to be in all the different areas required for the hotel industry. It's our number one industry. So why haven't we produced a curriculum? TVET needs to be fast-tracked. If it's for lack of money, then the government needs to make sure you take the AI money and you're going to pump it into TVET. And instead of 2 years down the road it being launched, it's launched for September. Now that's crazy, Lindsay. You know it don't work so. But that's how radical we have to think if we're going to get the radical changes we need and to really be serious. To really be serious about education and our children. Because if you had a TVET a cosmetology program there in the schools, you think this girl's got time to be fighting, messing up them eyebrows and all kind of thing? No. Because all of them, but then you'll have to free them up so they can wear the eyebrows and the fingernails and the rest of it to school. So that's another story. But the point is, they know it's valuable because they know the amount of money they have to pay to get the pieces to put in their hair, all the different fangalaling to make them look good, that they're willing to spend money on. If that becomes priority, that's where their passion is, that's where their heart is, then follow it and make it work. Make it an industry, right? But we've got to know where the passion is, and we've got to pour into it all the kind of energies and resources that we need. Oops, that was 4 to 6 minutes. Sorry, Mary.
Pastor, I just want to say you have taken everything that I would want to say in this area. And I just thank you for carrying that passion of TVET, because I really believe that it is pretty much a lot of the solution that we need in our islands. And so thank you for eloquently, laying it out for Anguilla. And I just want to support that. And just to say also that all of these things just need some research, planning, because I know it looks as if it's a mammoth task, but one step at a time. Let's prioritize, as you say. It requires also public education, because we have to destigmatize TVET. Okay, a lot of, you talk about the problems, academic versus thing, but we have to do public education, marketing of the idea, because parents also who are not sure about whether they want their children in these programs need to realize that this is where the money is. And this is where the students' passion is. It could be dance, it could be the performing arts. We need to follow the passions, because our students need to enjoy school. They need to enjoy learning, and we have to meet them where they're at. And so I just want to say, as I part with you guys, that it has been a pleasure and an honor sharing in this conversation. We've gone all over, and it was really, really rich. And so I just hope that, I think that this is where also the catalyst for change begins. Having public conversations like this on education is critical, because we really need to get to the nuts and bolts of what is required to make change. And so I just want to say kudos to all of you who are part of this planning and for hosting, and thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
I was gonna ask you to come. I was gonna come back around to give closing remarks. So, but you jumped ahead. But as we go into our closing remarks, because I'm ignoring the producers right now, because we've gone a little bit over time, and it's gonna be dark from my pay, like I said earlier. But as we go into our closing remarks, first of all, let me give some apologies for Miss Kentish Rogers. She's been speaking all day, and then she came here with all her passion tonight, so her voice failed her. coming up to the end. So I just want to give apologies for her not being able to close out the show. But we will now have some closing remarks just to finish off. And we say our good nights and everything. And I'll start with our guest, Mrs. Byron.
Well, I'm not sure if I have anything more to say, but to say thank you again. And I really look forward to hearing of the sort of changes, the incremental changes that can be made, one foot in front of the other. And once you have a vision and a plan, and you can tick off what those goals are and so on, then I believe that you will see the turnaround that you're looking for. And we cannot afford to twiddle our thumbs and do nothing because, as the saying goes, Rome is burning. And so we want to ensure that our young people, the parents, the teachers, the whole system has the buy-in and can, at the end of the day, um, benefit from a change that obviously is necessary. So thank you again and good night, everyone.
Thank you. Rev, your closing remarks, please.
I don't make it a habit to be on these kind of programs. I'm not a public person, though I engage the public a lot. But I was grateful for the opportunity to be a part of the exercise. We speak about whatever is burning, and in our schools, we can identify the areas that are ablaze. The behavior of the students, the fighting, and the threats, and the loss of focus and everything else. But if we can prioritize one area in our system and make it shine, an area where our students are passionate for. They're not passionate for science, they're not passionate for language, they're not passionate for those other traditional subjects. Where is their passion? Do what needs to be done to identify that passion. And let's make that area so brilliant that if we can rescue 30% of the 50% who are being lost, who are not graduating from high school, if we can rescue 30% of them in this little area, and maybe it's Tibet, maybe it is somewhere else, but we need to find that area and just pour $10 million in it from AI, and let's make it happen. Not 10 years down the road. It has to be within a short space of time, and pour in what needs to be poured in to rescue our children from having to fight every day in school because they ain't got nothing else to think about but fight. Take their minds off of it, about the anger and the frustration and the hatred and the beef and the rest of it. Give them something else to think about. And they can't wait for school to open because they got to get back engaged. Let's give them something that they desire. If we can do that, that's the radical change that we want to see in our school system. And that's it from me.
Thank you, Rev. Teach.
Yes, and thanks again for the opportunity to participate in this very important and lively debate on education. I recall, just to close off with from my comments, I recall when we were doing the interviews for the education task force. I think we ended up in Morris Vanderpool Primary, discussing with fourth graders or fifth graders at that time about some of these same questions, what children would like to see, how they were doing in classes, and so on. And I believe it might have been the last question. A young girl raised her hand when we were getting ready to wrap up, and she asked pointedly, she said, now, after you all would have gotten all this information from us. What are you going to do with it? She might have been in 5th grade. That child might be, if she's still in this system, she's probably now in 1st form or 2nd form. And I hope she's listening tonight, because at least, you know, we are here wrestling with the self-same issue. We have, some of us, we have promised Anguilla's children that we will keep at it until we get it right. Maybe not perfect, but something that, given our contextual situation, things that we have all alluded to earlier, that we should have been light years ahead. But so much for the past. We have all to look forward to. And as Daniel Williams said in his poem, only the future is ours now to desecrate. So we look forward and hope. Certainly, America, this cannot be the only conversation on education. So we are petitioning the people of APM Online to give us a sermon series, Rev. We got to keep this conversation going for as long as it takes. And change is not easy. It's messy, it's incremental. Sometimes it's confusing, you shirk away from it. But we have to keep at it, because as we are saying, it is far more expensive to do nothing than to try our best with it. So thanks again for being a part of this. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks to Rev and to Marion for dropping in and giving us of their time and thoughts, and for former Minister Deanne, and for you, Merrick. Thanks again for all that you do. Thank you and good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We're not quite close off yet, because I need to give my thanks. Rev, thank you for joining us. For someone who started out saying they don't have much to offer to this conversation, thank you so much. Mrs. Byron, I hope we didn't keep you up too much past your bedtime. But as Lennox said earlier, I will be petitioning the producers to have a part 2. I don't know when it will be. So I'm just putting both of you on notice from now that there will be definitely a part 2, because there are many questions I had that came up from the conversations and came up from the points that you guys were making. I had so many questions. The conversation was so lively. And for me to have the best seat in the house for it, I appreciate it. So I just want to say thank you guys for joining us. And I'm going to be thanking you from now for accepting the invitation for the part 2. But no, tonight's conversation was definitely one for the books. You guys, it was everything that I expected and more. And again, I say thank you. And with that, I will now say good night. Everyone, have a great night.
Good night. Thank you.